On the evening of my husband's funeral, my daughter-in-law walked into my kitchen and said, "You have 2 weeks to pack your things and leave this house. It was never really yours anyway." I'm Dorothy Washington, 68 years old. I looked at her standing there in her $12,000 Chanel suit. I know because I saw the receipt in Robert's study 3 months ago, and I said, "Okay." Then I went to the bank. My name is Dorothy Washington, and this is the story of how I discovered that my husband of 35 years loved me enough to build me a fortress I never knew I needed. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. The house felt wrong without Robert in it. Not just empty, wrong, like a sentence missing its verb, a song without its melody. I'd been sitting in our living room for the past hour, staring at his leather armchair by the window, the one with the worn spot on the right armrest where he'd rest his coffee every Sunday morning while reading the Oakland Tribune. The November light came through the bay windows the same way it always had, but everything looked different now. Dimmer, colder. It had been exactly 14 days since we buried my husband of 35 years. 14 days since I stood at Mountain View Cemetery and watched them lower Robert Eugene Washington into the ground. 70 years old. Sudden cardiac arrest, the doctors said. No warning, no goodbye. Just here one moment, reading his paper and laughing at the comics, and gone the next. Our house, this beautiful Victorian on Webster Street that we'd spent 3 decades restoring, felt like a museum now. Every room held ghosts of our life together. The kitchen where Robert taught himself to make perfect buttermilk biscuits. The back porch where we'd sit on summer evenings, watching the sunset over the Oakland hills. The bedroom upstairs where I still couldn't bear to sleep, choosing instead the guest room down the hall. I picked up the framed photograph from the side table. Robert and me in 1988, standing in front of this very house on the day we bought it. I was 33, he was 35. The house was a disaster then. Peeling paint, sagging porch, broken windows. But Robert had looked at me with those warm brown eyes and said, "This will be our legacy, Dot. Something we build together. Something that lasts." And we had built it. Room by room, year by year. Robert handling the business side, his restoration company, Washington & Sons Restoration, had done most of the work, while I managed our home, supported his dreams, raised our son. Our son, Brandon. I set the photograph down and walked to the window, watching the maple trees lose their last leaves in the front yard. Brandon was 45 now, married to Vanessa for 6 years, and somehow, in those 6 years, I'd lost him just as surely as I'd lost Robert. Different kind of loss. Slower, more painful in its own way. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Reminder, dinner tonight, 6 p.m. We need to discuss practical matters. Practical matters. That's what she'd said at the funeral, too, while I was still crying over my husband's casket. We'll need to discuss practical matters soon, Dorothy. Not Mom. She'd never called me Mom. Always Dorothy, with that particular tone that made my name sound like an accusation. I looked around the living room one more time. Robert's Old Spice cologne still lingered in the air. His reading glasses sat on the coffee table where he'd left them the morning of his heart attack. The newspaper, still folded to the crossword puzzle he never got to finish. "Pay attention to details, baby," he used to tell me. Details tell the truth when people won't. At the time, I thought he was just talking about his restoration work, how you had to notice the small things, the joints and seams and hidden supports that held everything together. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something else. Something about our family. Something about the future he somehow knew he wouldn't be here for. I checked my watch. 4:30. I had 90 minutes before dinner with Brandon and Vanessa. 90 minutes to compose myself, to prepare for whatever practical matters they wanted to discuss. But as I climbed the stairs to change clothes, I couldn't shake the feeling that had been growing since the funeral. The way Vanessa watched me during the service, the way Brandon avoided my eyes, the quiet conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Details. Something was coming. I just didn't know what yet. I arrived at 6 o'clock exactly, because my mother raised me to be punctual. Brandon and Vanessa's rental house in Piedmont was nice. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a manicured lawn and expensive cars in the driveway. Vanessa's white Mercedes. Brandon's new Audi with the custom rims I'd noticed at the funeral. Funny, Brandon had told Robert just last year that they were struggling financially. that business was slow, that they needed help. Details. Vanessa answered the door in a designer dress, Oscar de la Renta, if I wasn't mistaken. I'd seen enough of them in her closet over the years. She air-kissed near my cheek without actually touching me. "Dorothy, come in." The dining room table was set for 3, formal china, crystal wine glasses. Vanessa had always had expensive taste, even when Brandon claimed they couldn't afford it. Brandon was already seated, staring at his phone. He looked up when I entered, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy. The one who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. The one who'd say, "Mama, when I grow up, you'll live with me forever and I'll take care of you just like you take care of me." Then Vanessa sat down beside him, and that little boy disappeared behind the 45-year-old stranger he'd become. "How are you holding up, Mom?" Brandon asked. His voice was careful, rehearsed. "I'm managing," I said, taking my seat across from them. "One day at a time." "Of course," Vanessa said, pouring wine I didn't ask for. "Grief takes time, though I imagine the house must feel very large and empty now." There it was, not even 5 minutes in, and she was already circling. "I've lived in that house for 35 years, I said quietly. "It's home." "Yes, but that's exactly what we wanted to talk to you about." Vanessa set down the wine bottle with deliberate precision. "Brandon and I have been discussing your situation, and we're concerned." "My situation?" "You're alone now, Dorothy, in a 4-bedroom Victorian that needs constant maintenance. Do you even know how much the property taxes are? The insurance? The utilities?" I did, actually. $14,800 annually for property taxes. $3,200 for insurance. Roughly $400 monthly for utilities. Robert had always been meticulous about records, and I'd been paying more attention than anyone realized over the past few years. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, "I can manage." Vanessa's smile was sharp. "Can you? Dorothy, you haven't worked outside the home in decades. Robert handled all the finances. Do you even know what's in your bank account?" The question was designed to humiliate, to make me feel small and stupid and dependent. And 6 months ago, it might have worked. But something had changed in me over the past few years. Something I couldn't quite name yet. Maybe it was the way Robert had started asking me strange questions. "Dot, if something happened to me, would you know where all the important papers are?" Or the way he'd insist on walking me through certain documents, having me sign things he claimed were routine updates. At the time, I thought he was just getting old, getting worried about his mortality. Now I wondered. "I know enough," I said. Brandon finally spoke. "Mom, what Vanessa's trying to say is that we think you should consider alternative living arrangements." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Alternative living arrangements," I repeated slowly. "Assisted living," Vanessa clarified. "There are some beautiful communities in the area. Activities, people your own age, no maintenance to worry about. You'd be so much happier. I'm 68, not 98. I don't need assisted living. But you do need to be realistic." Vanessa's voice took on that patronizing tone she used when explaining things to people she considered beneath her. "The house is too much for you. The expenses are too high. And frankly, Brandon and I could really use the space." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Use the space? Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes. "Vanessa and I have been talking about starting a family. The house has so much potential, and we're already familiar with it, and Dad left it to me," he finished. "It's in the will, Mom. The house goes to me." The world tilted slightly. Not the content of this will. Robert and I had discussed leaving the house to Brandon years ago, when it made sense, when our son was still our son. But the way Brandon said it, the casual certainty, the complete lack of acknowledgement that I might have any claim to the home I'd lived in for 35 years. "I see," I said quietly. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that might have been mistaken for sympathy if you didn't look closely at her eyes. "We know this is difficult, Dorothy. That's why we're giving you time to adjust and make arrangements. 2 weeks should be sufficient." 2 weeks? That's generous, really. The market's hot right now, and we'd like to get the house listed as soon as possible. I've already spoken to Jennifer Kim, the top realtor in Oakland, and she's very excited about the property. But we need you to be out before we can start showing it. I looked at my son, really looked at him, tried to find some trace of the boy I'd raised, the one I'd stayed up with during chickenpox, The one I'd cheered for at Little League games. The one who'd cried in my arms when his goldfish died. "Brandon," I said, "do you really think this is what your father would have wanted?" For just a moment, just a flicker, I saw something in his face. Guilt, maybe. Uncertainty. But then Vanessa's hand found his under the table, and whatever I'd seen disappeared. "Dad would want you to be taken care of," he said. "And he'd want me to be secure. This is the practical thing to do." Vanessa smiled. "Exactly. And Dorothy, we're not heartless. We'll help you find a nice place. Maybe one of those over 55 communities. They have wonderful amenities." I sat there looking at these two people across from me, my son and his wife, my family, the people who should have been my support system in this horrible time of grief. And I thought about Robert, about the way he'd changed in the last few years. More secretive, more careful, the way he'd started making sure I knew where certain documents were kept, the way he'd had me sign papers I didn't fully understand, trusting him to handle the details. Pay attention to details, baby. Details tell the truth. Something had been wrong. Robert had known something was wrong. And he'd been preparing. The question was, preparing for what? I stood up slowly, setting my napkin on the table. I hadn't touched my wine or the salad Vanessa had prepared. "I need some time to think about this," I said. 2 weeks, Dorothy." Vanessa's voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "That's not negotiable. We've already started making plans." Brandon finally looked at me. "It's for the best, Mom. You'll see." I walked to the door, my purse clutched tight in my hands. At the threshold, I turned back. "When you were 7 years old," I said to Brandon, "you had nightmares for 3 months after watching a scary movie at a friend's house. Every night you'd come into our bedroom and crawl between your father and me. Robert would put his arm around you and say, 'I've got you, son. Nothing bad can touch you here.' And you'd fall right back to sleep, safe and loved." Brandon's face went pale. "I just wonder," I continued quietly, "what happened to that little boy who understood that family meant protection, that home meant safety, that love wasn't a transaction?" I left before either of them could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room bed, still couldn't face the master bedroom without Robert, and stared at the ceiling, replaying the dinner over and over. 2 weeks. They were giving me 2 weeks to pack up 35 years of my life and disappear. Not just the house. The gardens Robert and I had planted together. The kitchen we'd remodeled with our own hands. The porch where we'd watched Brandon take his first steps. The bedroom where Robert had died in my arms. His last words. "I love you, Dot. I made sure you'll be okay. I made sure you'll be okay." What did that mean? At 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went down to Robert's study. I'd barely been in here since he died. It hurt too much, seeing his desk exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses beside his computer, his coffee mug still sitting on the desk blotter. But now I looked at the room with new eyes. Details. The filing cabinet in the corner. The safe behind the painting of Oakland Harbor. The stack of folders on his desk, each one labeled in Robert's careful handwriting. I started with the desk. The top folder was labeled Important Documents, Dot. I'd never seen it before. Inside were copies of our birth certificates, marriage license, Brandon's birth certificate, normal things. But underneath was an envelope with my name on it. Inside the envelope was a business card. Helen Rodriguez, Senior Account Manager, First National Bank. And a handwritten note from Robert. For Dot, if anything happens, Helen knows everything. Trust her. Trust her about what? I checked my watch. 4:30 in the morning. Too early to call a bank. But I could at least see what else Robert had left me. The safe. Robert had shown me the combination years ago, made me memorize it. Our anniversary. August 15th, 88. Inside the safe, our passports, the deed to the house, Robert's will, which I already knew left everything to my beloved wife Dorothy and our son Brandon, and a large manila envelope marked for Dorothy, read first. My hands shook as I opened it. The first document was a letter, dated 6 months ago. Robert's handwriting, but shakier than usual. My dearest Dot, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've probably already discovered that things aren't what they seemed. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. I wanted to. God knows I practiced the conversation 100 times, but I could never find the right words, and I was afraid. Afraid of what the truth might do to you, to us, to our family. But I couldn't leave you unprotected. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I built you a fortress. Start with Helen at First National Bank. She has instructions to show you everything. Then call Gloria Henderson at the company. She'll explain the rest. I know this is confusing and probably scary, but Dot, you are so much stronger than you've ever given yourself credit for. You raised our son. You built a home. You stood by me through every struggle. That strength didn't disappear just because I'm not there anymore. I failed to raise a son strong enough to stand up for his mother, but I didn't fail to protect the woman I love. Use what I've left you. Use it wisely. Use it when you're ready. You are not helpless. You are not alone. You are not without power. I love you, Dot. I always will. Robert. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He knew. Somehow Robert had known this was coming, known that Brandon and Vanessa would try this, known that I'd need protection. The rest of the envelope contained photocopies of documents I didn't understand, bank statements, legal papers about something called the Washington Family Trust, property deeds, business incorporation documents. None of it made sense to me, but Robert said Helen would explain. I looked at the clock. 5:15. Still too early, but not too early to start making a list. I found a notebook in Robert's desk and began writing down everything I'd noticed over the past few years. Every strange conversation, every odd request, every time Robert had asked me to sign something routine. The list grew longer than I expected. 3 years ago, Robert had me sign new signature cards at the bank, said it was just updating our accounts. 2 years ago, more papers to sign. Something about restructuring the business for tax purposes. 18 months ago, Robert insisted I come to the bank to sign papers for estate planning updates. Last year, even more signatures, these for something called a family trust. 6 months ago, Robert made me memorize the combination to this safe and showed me where he kept all important documents. And the strangest thing, 4 years ago, Robert had started documenting everything about Brandon. Every visit, every request for money, every time Vanessa asked about our finances. I found those records in another folder. Brandon, loans and requests. My heart sank as I read through them. July 2019, $8,000 for business startup costs. November 2019, $12,000 for investment opportunity. March 2020, $15,000 for pandemic emergency funds. September 2020, $18,000 for home renovation. January 2021, $9,500 for car repairs. May 2021, $14,000 for medical bills. The list went on, and on, and on. Each entry had a note from Robert. Told Brandon this was a loan. He agreed to repayment terms, no payments received. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking again. But not from grief this time. From anger. Brandon had borrowed, no taken, nearly $95,000 from his father over 4 years, while telling Robert they were struggling, while Vanessa wore designer clothes and Brandon drove expensive cars. And now they wanted my house. At 8 o'clock, I called First National Bank and asked for Helen Rodriguez. Mrs. Washington. Helen's voice was warm but cautious. I've been expecting your call. How soon can you come in? I can be there in an hour. I'll clear my schedule, Helen said. Mrs. Washington, there are some things you need to know about your financial situation. Things your husband made very sure you'd discover when you were ready. I'm ready now, I said. And I was. First National Bank sat on Broadway in downtown Oakland, a solid brick building that had been there since the 1920s. I'd passed it thousands of times over the years, but had only been inside a handful of occasions. Always with Robert, always letting him handle the boring business stuff, while I waited in the car or looked at the paintings in the lobby. Now I walked through those doors alone, my purse heavy with the documents from Robert's safe, and asked for Helen Rodriguez. She came out to greet me herself. A woman about my age, maybe a few years younger, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a neat bun and warm brown eyes that held both sympathy and something else. Knowledge. Mrs. Washington. She shook my hand firmly. I'm so sorry for your loss. Robert was a wonderful man. Thank you. My voice was steadier than I expected. He left me a note, said you could explain some things. Helen's expression shifted slightly. Let's go to my office where we can talk privately. Her office was small but neat, with photos of what looked like grandchildren on her desk and a wall full of certificates and community service awards. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. "Mrs. Washington, may I call you Dorothy?" "Please." "Dorothy, your husband was one of the most meticulous clients I've ever worked with. He came to see me about 4 years ago with some concerns about your family situation." My heart began to pound. What kind of concerns? Helen turned to her computer, fingers moving across the keyboard. "He never explicitly said, but he asked me to help him restructure his assets in a way that would protect you. His words exactly were, 'If something happens to me, I need to make sure my wife will never be at anyone's mercy.'" She pulled up something on her screen, then turned it toward me. "Let's start with what you think you have. Joint checking account for household expenses?" "Yes. I check it occasionally, usually about $15,000. Helen nodded. "Correct. Current balance is $15,247. She clicked something. "Joint savings account?" "I didn't know we had one of those." "You do. Robert opened it 6 years ago. Current balance, $85,430. I blinked. $85,000? I never knew. He wanted you to have funds you could access easily if needed. But Dorothy, that's just the beginning." Helen's expression was gentle but firm. "Your husband also opened several accounts in your name only, accounts he funded systematically over the past 4 years. My mouth went dry. "What kind of accounts?" Helen clicked again. "Money market account? $180,000. My breath caught. Certificate of deposit opened 3 years ago, $200,000. That can't be. Second certificate of deposit opened 18 months ago, $150,000. The room seemed to tilt. "How?" "Small transfers from the business account, $50 here, $100 there. Amounts that wouldn't be noticed in the day-to-day operations. But over time," Helen looked at me seriously. "Dorothy, in your name alone, you have approximately $630,000 in liquid assets." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. $630,000. "But there's more." Helen printed out several documents and slid them across her desk. "Do you know what a trust is?" Vaguely. Something about managing assets?" "Exactly. 4 years ago, your husband created something called the Washington Family Trust. You are listed as the sole beneficiary and the sole trustee." "I don't understand. What does that mean?" "It means you own it. You control it. And everything in it belongs to you." Helen pulled out more papers. "The trust has been receiving regular transfers from the business account for Washington & Sons Restoration, approximately $8,000 to $12,000 per month for the past 4 years. I did the math in my head, even though I didn't want to. 8,000 times 12 months, times 4 years. That's roughly $450,000, yes. Current trust balance, with investment returns, $573,000. The numbers were so large they stopped making sense. I'd gone from thinking I might have to survive on Social Security and whatever Robert left in our joint account to discovering I had over $1 million. Over $1 million that Brandon and Vanessa knew nothing about. "Helen," I said slowly, "my son told me the house was left to him in the will." Helen's expression darkened slightly. "And the house was appraised at approximately $680,000 in the current market. However," she pulled up another document. 18 months ago, Robert took out a home equity line of credit for $420,000. "What? Why would he do that?" "The funds were transferred directly into your trust account. Dorothy, the house may be left to your son in the will, but it comes with a $420,000 debt that must be paid off. And since you own the trust that holds that debt," she let the implication hang in the air, "I hold the mortgage on my own house." "Precisely. Your son can inherit the house, but he'll owe you $420,000 to clear the title." I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Robert had built me a fortress, all right. A fortress made of money and legal documents and careful planning. "There's one more thing you need to know," Helen said quietly. "And for this, you'll need to speak with Gloria Henderson, the company accountant. But I can tell you the basics. Washington & Sons Restoration was never sold. It was restructured." "What do you mean?" 4 years ago, Robert transferred ownership of the company into the Washington Family Trust. You don't just have savings, Dorothy. You own the business. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes after leaving Helen's office, unable to drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white, and I stared at the folder of documents in my passenger seat like they might disappear if I looked away. $1,143,000. That's what Helen had calculated as my total accessible assets. Over $1 million that my son and daughter-in-law knew nothing about. Money Robert had carefully, systematically hidden away to protect me. From my own family. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Dorothy, I've scheduled a meeting with Jennifer Kim for Thursday at 10 a.m. to discuss listing the house. Please make sure it's presentable. First impressions matter. I stared at the message, at the casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I would just comply, pack up my life, disappear into some assisted living facility while they took over the home Robert and I built together. They had no idea that the woman they were trying to dismiss as helpless and ignorant had just discovered she held all the power. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I thought about Robert's letter. Use what I've left you. Use it wisely. Use it when you're ready. Was I ready? I looked down at my hands, 68 years old. Hands that had changed diapers and baked birthday cakes and held my husband's hand through 35 years of marriage. Hands that everyone assumed were too old, too weak, too ignorant to handle anything important. But these hands had also planted gardens and refinished furniture and held our family together through Robert's long hours building his business. These hands were stronger than anyone knew, including me. I started the car and drove home, but I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I sat on the front porch, Robert's porch, our porch, and pulled out the business card Helen had given me. Gloria Henderson, company accountant. I called the number. Henderson Accounting. A warm voice answered on the second ring. Hello, my name is Dorothy Washington. Helen Rodriguez at First National Bank suggested I call you. She said you could explain some things about my husband's business. There was a pause. Then, Mrs. Washington, yes, I've been expecting you to call. I'm so sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man. Thank you. Could we meet? Soon? How about tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? I can come to you if that's easier. No, I said quickly. Something about leaving the house felt important. Taking action. Moving forward. I'll come to your office. Where are you located? I'm in a small office complex on Telegraph Avenue near Temescal. Number 2847, Suite B. I'll be there at 9. After hanging up, I finally went inside. But this time I didn't see the house through grief-clouded eyes. I saw it through the eyes of someone who was beginning to understand what Robert had built here. Not just a home, not just a legacy, a weapon. Gloria Henderson's office was tucked between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, the kind of modest location you'd drive past 100 times without noticing. The waiting room was small but immaculate, with family photos on the walls and a coffee maker burbling in the corner. Gloria herself was a black woman about my age, maybe 65, with natural silver hair styled short and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She greeted me with a firm handshake and kind eyes that held the same knowing look Helen's had. They'd both been in on Robert's secret. Mrs. Washington, please come into my office. She led me into a back room lined with filing cabinets and 2 computer monitors on a large desk. Coffee? I just made a fresh pot. Please. I needed something to do with my hands. Once we were settled, Gloria pulled out a thick folder from her filing cabinet. The tab read, Washington Robert, Confidential. Your husband was one of my longest-standing clients, Gloria began. 23 years. I've done the books for Washington & Sons Restoration since 2001. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Washington, may I ask what you know about the business? I know Robert started it in 1995, that it does restoration work on historic buildings, that our son worked there occasionally over the years. I hesitated. And Helen told me yesterday that Robert restructured it 4 years ago. That ownership was transferred into a trust. Gloria nodded slowly. The Washington Family Trust, with you as the sole beneficiary. She opened the folder. Mrs. Washington, Dorothy, what has your son told you about the business? That it was struggling. That Robert sold it before he died and barely made enough to cover the debts. Gloria's expression hardened. I see. And did Brandon tell you this before or after your husband's death? Both. He's been saying it for years. That business was slow, margins were tight, that he was worried about his father's financial situation. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned one of her monitors toward me. This is the profit and loss statement for Washington & Sons Restoration for the past fiscal year. I looked at the numbers, trying to make sense of the rows and columns. The bottom line, Gloria said, pointing to a number highlighted in green, shows an annual profit of $387,450. I blinked. That's not struggling. No, it's not, and it hasn't been struggling for quite some time. She pulled up more documents. Here are the P&L statements for the past 4 years. Year 1, $312,000 profit. Year 2, $345,000 profit. Year 3, $368,000 profit. Year 4, $387,000 profit. The business has been growing steadily, Gloria continued, especially after Robert brought on Sam Tucker as full-time foreman 5 years ago. Sam's been essentially running the day-to-day operations, which freed Robert up to focus on client relationships and strategic planning. But why would Brandon lie about this? Gloria pulled out another folder. This one was labeled Washington Brandon, Loans. My stomach clenched. 4 years ago, your husband came to me with a request. He wanted me to document every financial transaction involving your son, every loan, every payment, every conversation about money. She slid the folder across to me. He said, Gloria, I love my boy, but I'm not blind. I need to protect Dot. Inside the folder were dozens of loan agreements, each one on official company letterhead, each one signed by both Robert and Brandon. July 15, 2019, $8,000. Business startup loan for Pierce Marketing Consultants. Payment schedule, $400 per month for 20 months. Payments received, $0. November 3, 2019, $12,000. Investment opportunity loan. Payment schedule, $500 per month for 24 months. Payments received, $0. March 22, 2020, $15,000. Emergency pandemic funds. Payment schedule, $600 per month for 25 months. Payments received, $0. The list went on and on. Each loan had detailed payment schedules. Each schedule showed the same thing. Payments received, $0. Gloria, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How much does Brandon owe? She pulled up a spreadsheet. Principal borrowed over 4 years, $94,500. With the interest rate specified in the loan agreements, Robert set it at prime plus 2% and late payment penalties that kicked in after the first missed payment. She pointed to the bottom line. Current amount owed as of today, $103,847. Over $100,000. My son owed the family business, my business, over $100,000. But Robert never, I tried to find words. He never demanded payment? Never mentioned Brandon was behind? He sent payment reminders every month for the first year. After that, he stopped, but he documented every single missed payment. Gloria's voice was gentle but firm. Dorothy, your husband loved his son, but he also saw what was happening, the expensive clothes, the new cars, the vacations to Turks and Caicos while claiming poverty. She pulled out printed screenshots from social media, Vanessa's Instagram and Facebook accounts, photos of designer handbags, restaurant meals at expensive San Francisco establishments, a trip to Napa Valley, a weekend in Cabo San Lucas. Each photo was dated and cross-referenced with loan dates. March 2020, Brandon receives $15,000 emergency pandemic funds. March 2020, Vanessa posts photos from weekend getaway at Auberge du Soleil. Average room rate, $800 per night. May 2021, Brandon receives $14,000 for medical bills. May 2021, Vanessa posts photo of new Cartier Love bracelet. Retail price, $7,850. Robert hired a private investigator? I asked, looking at the meticulous documentation. No, he just paid attention, followed their public social media, saved receipts he found when they visited. Gloria pulled out another document. He also documented every conversation. Look at this one from June 2022. It was a typed transcript of a conversation between Robert and Brandon. Brandon, Dad, I hate to ask again, but we're really struggling. Vanessa's family can't help anymore, and I don't know what else to do. Robert, son, I've lent you nearly $95,000 over the past few years. You haven't made a single payment. Brandon, I know. But those were gifts, right? I mean, you never really expected me to pay them back. You're my father. Robert, Brandon, we signed loan agreements, legal documents. Brandon, come on, Dad, that's just paperwork. Family doesn't charge family interest. Robert, what about the loan for medical bills last year? Vanessa posted photos of a $8,000 bracelet the same week. Brandon, long pause. Are you tracking us? That's messed up, Dad. Robert, I'm protecting your mother. Something you should be thinking about too. Brandon, whatever. Can I have the loan or not? I read the transcript twice, my hands shaking. This wasn't the son I'd raised. This wasn't the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard and call them flowers for the prettiest mama in the world. When did he change? I whispered. Gloria's expression was sad. Your husband thought it started about 6 years ago, right around when Brandon met Vanessa. She pulled out one more document, a background check on Vanessa Pierce. Robert hired an investigator for this one, Gloria admitted. He wanted to understand who his son had married. I read through the report. Vanessa Marie Pierce, born 1982, Sacramento, California. Father, Donald Pierce, former CEO of Pierce Real Estate Development. Mother, Catherine Pierce, née Ashford, homemaker. 2006 engaged to Richard Ashford III, heir to Ashford Properties. 2007. Engagement broken after Donald Pierce arrested for securities fraud. 2008. Pierce Real Estate declares bankruptcy. Assets seized 2009 to 2017. Various jobs in marketing, none lasting more than 18 months. 2017. Meets Brandon Washington through professional networking event. Her father went to prison, I said, for defrauding investors out of $43 million. The family lost everything. Their home, their social standing, their money. Gloria's voice was matter-of-fact. Vanessa went from being a debutante engaged to old money to being the daughter of a convicted felon no one would touch. So she found Brandon. Robert's theory was that she researched him, knew about the business, knew about your family home in Oakland, knew about your financial stability. She saw an opportunity. I thought about the first time I met Vanessa, how charming she'd been, how interested in our family history, in the house, in Robert's business. At the time, I thought she was just being polite, trying to connect with her future in-laws. Now I saw it differently. She'd been gathering intelligence. Gloria, there's something I don't understand. If Robert knew all this, why did he keep lending Brandon money? Gloria smiled sadly. He never stopped hoping his son would wake up, would see what was happening, would choose to be better. She pulled out one final document. But he also wasn't stupid. Look at this. It was a codicil to Robert's will, dated 6 months before his death. Legal language I struggled to understand, but Gloria walked me through it. Essentially, it states that any loans made to Brandon Washington from Washington & Sons Restoration are to be considered debts against his inheritance. If Brandon inherits the house valued at $680,000, but owes the business, your business, $103,847, then those debts must be satisfied before clear title can transfer. So even if he gets the house, he has to pay you first, plus the $420,000 from the home equity line that also went into your trust. Gloria met my eyes. Dorothy, your son can inherit that house, but he'll owe you $523,847 before he can sell it, refinance it, or do anything else with it. $500,000. Brandon and Vanessa were planning to kick me out of my home, sell it for $680,000, and pocket the profit. They had no idea that home came with over $500,000 in debt. To me, I left Gloria's office in a daze, the folder of documents heavy in my bag. The November sun was bright, making me squint as I walked to my car. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Washington, this is Sam Tucker. I worked for Mr. Robert at the restoration company. Of course, Sam. I remember you from the funeral. Yes, ma'am. His voice was cautious. I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know something. Your son came by the worksite this morning. My stomach tightened. What did he want? Started asking questions about equipment values, current contracts, cash flow. Told the crew there'd be changes coming and evaluations of all personnel. Sam paused. Mrs. Washington, he was talking like he owns the company. Did you tell him anything? No, ma'am. Mr. Robert was very specific with me about 4 years ago. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should wait for instructions from the legal owner. He never said that would be Brandon. I made a quick decision. Sam, can you meet me somewhere? Today, if possible. I need to talk to you about the business. I'm on my lunch break now. There's a coffee shop on Telegraph near 29th Street. Bean there? I can be there in 15 minutes. Sam Tucker was already waiting when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. He stood when he saw me, a tall man in his late 50s with silver in his close-cut hair and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime building things. Mrs. Washington, he shook my hand. Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for calling. Sam, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Yes, ma'am. Did Robert talk to you about family matters? About Brandon? Sam was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his words. Mr. Robert and I worked together for 25 years. We were more than boss and employee. We were friends. He met my eyes. Yes, ma'am, he talked to me. What did he say? 4 years ago, he came to me and said, Sam, I'm putting some things in place for Dot. If anything happens to me, you make sure she knows about you, about Gloria, about the truth. He made me promise. The truth about what? Sam pulled out his own folder. Mr. Robert had me document every time Brandon came around the business, every conversation, every request, every time he tried to interfere with operations. Inside were detailed notes in Sam's careful handwriting. June 12, 2020. Brandon arrived at job site, Victorian Restoration, Jackson Street. Asked crew to use cheaper materials than specified in contract. Told them to cut corners to increase profit margin. I refused. He said, my father won't be around forever, and when I'm in charge, things will be different. September 3rd, 2021. Brandon showed up at the equipment yard asking for keys and access codes. Said he needed to inventory assets for insurance purposes. I told him he'd need authorization from Mr. Robert. He became angry, said I was just an employee and had no right to question him. March 15th, 2022. Brandon contacted our biggest client, Morrison Office Building Restoration, $340,000 contract, and suggested they could get a better price if they worked directly with him instead of going through Washington & Sons. Client called Mr. Robert to verify. Contract nearly lost. He was trying to undermine his own father's business, I said quietly. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Robert knew it. That's why he restructured everything. Why he made sure you would be protected. Sam leaned forward. Mrs. Washington, the crew has been worried since Mr. Robert passed. We all loved him. And we all know you're the one who really understood what this business meant, not Brandon. Sam, I have to tell you something. Something I just found out myself. I took a breath. I own Washington & Sons Restoration. Robert transferred it into a trust 4 years ago. I'm the beneficiary. Sam's face broke into the first smile I'd seen from him. Well, I'll be damned. Pardon my language, ma'am. What I need to know is, can the business continue operating without Robert? Mrs. Washington, I've been running the day-to-day for 5 years. Mr. Robert handled client relationships and the big picture strategy, but I managed the crews, the schedules, the quality control. We have 3 major contracts running right now, worth a combined $780,000. We're booked solid through next September. He pulled out a project list. If you're asking whether we can keep going, the answer is absolutely yes. And if I asked you to continue exactly as you have been? I'd be honored, ma'am. Mr. Robert built something good here, something that matters. We restore beautiful old buildings and give them new life. I'd hate to see that end. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. Mom, I stopped by the house. Where are you? We need to talk about the moving timeline. I stared at the message, at the casual assumption that I would just be available, just comply, just disappear when told. Sam, I said slowly, how many employees does Washington & Sons have? 12 full-time plus 6 part-timers and subcontractors we use regularly. And they all know Robert? Knew him, I mean? Every single one. Some have been with us for 15 years. We're like family. How would they feel about testifying if it came to that? About Brandon's interference? His attempts to undercut the business? Sam's expression turned serious. You planning something, Mrs. Washington? I'm planning to protect what Robert built. For both of us. I met his eyes. Brandon and Vanessa think they're going to take over my house and probably the business. They think I'm helpless and ignorant. They have no idea what Robert left me. What do you need from me? Keep running the business exactly as you have been. Don't tell Brandon anything. If he shows up again, tell him you need written authorization from the legal owner before discussing company business. And who's the legal owner? I am, and I have every legal document to prove it. Sam stood and extended his hand again. Mrs. Washington, Mr. Robert once told me, Sam, my wife is the strongest person I know. She just doesn't know it yet. I think you're about to prove him right. After Sam left, I sat alone in the coffee shop and pulled out my phone. I had 12 days left in the 2-week deadline Vanessa had given me. 12 days before they expected me to be gone. But I wasn't going anywhere. I opened my messages and typed a response to Brandon. We do need to talk. Can you and Vanessa come to the house Thursday evening? 7 p.m. There are some things we need to discuss. His response came immediately. Finally being reasonable. Yes, we'll be there. Vanessa's bringing the realtor paperwork. I smiled. Let them bring whatever they wanted. I had something better. I had the truth. Wednesday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself. Not grocery shopping or running errands. Real shopping. I drove to Nordstrom in downtown Oakland and bought myself a new dress, a deep navy blue sheath that the saleswoman said made me look dignified and powerful. I bought new shoes. Had my hair done at a salon Robert used to tell me I should visit more often. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who knew exactly what she was worth. That afternoon, I called attorney Patricia Wilson, the lawyer whose card I'd found in Robert's safe alongside all the trust documents. Helen had mentioned her name as well. Mrs. Washington. Patricia's voice was warm but professional. I wondered when you'd call. Your husband prepared me for this conversation. He told you about everything? Everything. The trust, the business restructuring, the loans to Brandon, the home equity line. Robert came to see me every few months for the past 4 years, updating me on the situation, making sure every legal document was airtight. She paused. He loved you very much, Mrs. Washington, and he wanted to make sure you'd never be vulnerable. I need you at my house tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Brandon and Vanessa will be there. You're ready to confront them? I thought about the question. Was I ready? Ready to face my only son and tell him that everything he thought he knew was wrong? Ready to draw a line in the sand and enforce it? Yes, I'm ready. Then I'll be there. And Mrs. Washington, bring all the documents Robert left you. Every single one. We're going to need them. That evening, I sat in Robert's study and went through everything one final time. The bank statements, the loan agreements, the business incorporation papers, the trust documents, the codicil to the will, Sam's notes about Brandon's interference, Gloria's profit and loss statements showing the business's success, and Robert's letters. I read his final letter again, the one that had been in the safe. You are not helpless. You are not alone. You are not without power. I understand now, I whispered to the empty room. I understand what you were trying to tell me. Robert hadn't just left me money. He'd left me proof, documentation, a paper trail so detailed and so thorough that there could be no argument, no negotiation, no room for Brandon and Vanessa to twist the truth. He'd built me a fortress made of facts. Thursday, 6:45 p.m. I sat in the living room, wearing my new navy dress, every document organized in folders on the coffee table. Patricia Wilson had arrived at 6:30, carrying her own briefcase full of legal papers. She sat in the armchair near the window, professional and calm. How are you feeling? She asked. Honestly, terrified. I looked at her. He's still my son. No matter what he's done, he's still my baby boy. I know, and that's what makes you stronger than them, Dorothy. You still have a heart. They're operating purely from greed. At exactly 7 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched Brandon and Vanessa get out of his Audi. Vanessa carried a large folder, probably the realtor paperwork she'd mentioned. Brandon looked uncomfortable, his shoulders tight with tension. They still thought this was going to go their way. I opened the door before they could knock. Mom! Brandon's greeting was awkward. We're here. Come in. My voice was steady. I've made coffee. Vanessa's eyes went immediately to Patricia. Who's this? Patricia Wilson. I'm Mrs. Washington's attorney. Vanessa's expression hardened. I told you at dinner, Dorothy. Wasting money on lawyers when you should be saving for your assisted living expenses. This is exactly the kind of poor decision-making we're concerned about. Please sit down, I said, gesturing to the sofa across from where Patricia and I were positioned. We have a lot to discuss. They sat. Vanessa perched on the edge of the cushion like she might need to jump up at any moment. Brandon slumped beside her. Before you start with whatever this is, Vanessa said, opening her folder, we need to finalize the timeline for listing the house. Jennifer Kim has buyers already interested, but we need you out by this weekend to... Vanessa, I interrupted quietly. I'm not leaving. Silence. Brandon blinked. What? I'm not leaving my house. Not this weekend. Not in 2 weeks. Not ever, unless I decide to. Vanessa's laugh was sharp. Dorothy, we've been through this. The house goes to Brandon. It's in Robert's will. You don't have a choice. You're right that the house is left to Brandon in the will, I said. But there are some things you don't know. Things Robert made sure to protect. Protect from what? Brandon's voice rose slightly. Mom, what are you talking about? I reached for the first folder. Let's start with the business. Brandon, you've told me for years that Washington & Sons Restoration was struggling, that your father barely kept it afloat, that when he died, the business was sold for just enough to cover debts. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. That's what Dad told me. Really? I pulled out Gloria's profit and loss statements. Because according to the company accountant, the business has been consistently profitable for the past 4 years. Last year alone, it netted $387,450 in profit. I slid the documents across the coffee table. Brandon reached for them with shaking hands. That's impossible, Vanessa said. Brandon, your father said... What your father told you and what was true are 2 different things, Patricia interjected smoothly. Mr. Washington was very careful about who he shared financial information with, and why. I don't understand, Brandon said, staring at the numbers. Why would Dad lie to me? Maybe because every time he gave you money, you spent it on luxury items while claiming to be broke? I pulled out the second folder. These are loan agreements between you and Washington & Sons Restoration, signed by both you and your father, totaling $94,500 over 4 years. Brandon went pale. Loans? Vanessa grabbed the papers. You told me those were gifts. You said your father was helping us out of family obligation. They were loans, I said firmly. Legal, documented loans with payment schedules and interest rates. And Brandon, according to these records, you've made exactly 0 payments. But Dad he never asked me for money. He never even mentioned the payment schedules. No, he didn't, but he documented every missed payment, every late fee, every accumulation of interest. I pulled out another document. As of today, with interest and penalties, you owe the business $103,847. The number hung in the air like smoke. $100,000, Vanessa whispered. Brandon, where did all that money go? Where do you think? I pulled out the printed Instagram photos. Cabo San Lucas, Napa Valley weekends, Cartier bracelets, designer clothes. You've been living well beyond your means on money borrowed from Robert while telling him you were struggling. Vanessa's face flushed red. You've been tracking us? That's stalking. No, Patricia said calmly. It's documenting publicly available information that you chose to share on social media. Nothing illegal about it. Unlike borrowing money under false pretenses. Brandon stood up abruptly. Okay, fine. I borrowed money. I should have paid it back. But that doesn't change the fact that Dad left me the house. That's still mine. Sit down, Brandon. My voice had steel in it I didn't know I possessed. We're not done. He sat. I pulled out the trust documents. 4 years ago, your father created the Washington Family Trust. He transferred ownership of the business into this trust. I am the sole beneficiary and trustee, which means, Brandon, I own Washington & Sons Restoration. Not you, not the estate, me. What? Vanessa grabbed for the papers. That can't be legal. Brandon is the heir. It's perfectly legal, Patricia said. Mr. Washington had the right to structure his business assets however he chose. He chose to protect his wife. So the $100,000 Brandon owes, I continued, he owes it to me, to my business. Brandon's hands were shaking. Mom, please, we made mistakes. I made mistakes. But we can work this out. I'll pay you back. I swear. Over what timeline? Patricia asked. At what interest rate? Do you have $103,847 in liquid assets? Silence. I didn't think so, Patricia said. Vanessa stood up, her face twisted with rage. This is elder abuse. You're manipulating a grieving widow, filling her head with lies about her own son. Sit down, Mrs. Washington. Patricia's voice was ice. Or I'll have you removed for threatening my client. Vanessa sat, but her eyes were blazing. There's more, I said quietly. I pulled out the home equity line of credit documents. 18 months ago, Robert took out a home equity loan on this house for $420,000. Brandon's head snapped up. He did what? He borrowed against the house's value and transferred every penny into my trust account. I met my son's eyes. So yes, Brandon, the house is left to you in the will, but it comes with a $420,000 lien against it, a lien held by me, plus the $103,847 in business loans, Patricia added. That's $523,847 in total debt that must be satisfied before clear title can transfer. The math was simple enough even for Vanessa. The house was worth approximately $680,000, minus $523,847 in debt. That left $156,153. So even if you inherit the house, I said, you'll owe me over $500,000 before you can sell it, refinance it, or do anything else with it. Brandon's face crumpled. Why? Why would Dad do this? Because he loved me, I said simply, and because he saw what was happening to our family. He saw you changing, saw Vanessa's influence, saw that you were willing to take and take and take without ever giving back. He hoped you'd wake up, but he wasn't going to let me pay the price if you didn't. Vanessa's voice was venomous. You manipulated him, a dying old man. Your father wasn't dying when he set these structures in place 4 years ago, Patricia interrupted. He was perfectly healthy and of sound mind. Every document has been reviewed by independent legal counsel. Everything is ironclad. There's one more thing you should know, I said. I pulled out the background check on Vanessa. Your family's history, Vanessa. Your father's fraud conviction. Your broken engagement when the money disappeared. I know you've done this before. Vanessa went white. What are you talking about? Sacramento, 2009. You married a widower named Gerald Thompson, convinced him to add you to his property titles and bank accounts. His adult children sued you for elder abuse. The case settled quietly, but the court records are public. Patricia slid a folder across to Brandon. Your wife has a pattern of targeting vulnerable people for their assets. Your father discovered this 2 years ago. It's why he accelerated his protection measures. Brandon opened the folder with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read. The shock, the betrayal, the dawning realization that everything he thought he knew was built on lies. Brandon, Vanessa's voice was desperate. That was different. That was, you lied to me. Brandon's voice was hollow. About everything. About your past. About us. About my father. Your father lied to you too, Vanessa shot back. He was hiding money, setting up secret trusts, plotting against his own son. He was protecting his wife, Brandon shouted, standing up again. From people like you. Vanessa stood too, grabbing her purse. Fine. You want to side with Mommy? Do it, but you're going to lose everything. The house, the business, all of it. And I'm not going down with you. She stormed toward the door, then turned back. You'll regret this, Dorothy. All of you. Is that a threat, Mrs. Washington? Patricia asked calmly, her phone visibly recording. Because I want to be clear about that for the legal record. Vanessa's face went purple with rage, but she didn't say anything else. She just slammed out of the house, her Mercedes screeching out of the driveway moments later. Brandon stood in the middle of my living room, looking lost. Mom, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know about Vanessa's past. I swear. And the money, I thought Dad was just helping. I never meant for it to become over $100,000 in debt, I finished. Brandon, sit down. He sat, and for the first time in 6 years, I saw my son. Really saw him. Not the entitled, demanding man Vanessa had shaped him into, but the confused, hurting boy underneath. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You owe me $103,847 in business debt. I'm going to restructure that into a formal payment plan. Patricia will draw up the papers. You'll pay me $1,200 per month for the next 8 years. I can do that. I will. The house, I continued, stays with me for now. When I'm ready, if I'm ever ready, to move or pass it on, we'll revisit that. But Brandon, you need to understand something. This house was never just yours because of some will. This house was built by your father and me together. Our sweat, our dreams, our life. You don't get to erase that. I know. I'm sorry. And one more thing. I looked at my son. You need therapy, real therapy, to figure out how you lost yourself so completely. How you became someone who could throw his own mother out of her home 2 weeks after burying her husband. Brandon's face crumpled and he started to cry. Real tears. Not manipulation, just grief and shame and regret. I don't know what happened to me, he sobbed. I don't know when I stopped being your son. I wanted to go to him, wanted to hold him like I had when he was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms. But I stayed in my chair. That's what you need to figure out, I said gently. And until you do, I need distance. I need to heal. I need to build my own life without worrying about being taken advantage of. I understand. He wiped his eyes. Can I ask one thing? What? Dad's last words. Were you with him when he died? Yes. What did he say? I thought about lying, making it easier, but Robert had died protecting the truth, and I owed him honesty. He said, I love you, Dot. I made sure you'll be okay. I paused, and then he said, tell Brandon I'm sorry I couldn't save him. But I saved you. Brandon's sob was broken, raw. He stood up, moving toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. I'll start payments next month. And Mom, I am sorry for everything. After he left, Patricia and I sat in silence for a long moment. How do you feel? She asked. Exhausted, sad, but I searched for the word. Free. I feel free. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of my cottage in Mendocino, watching the morning fog burn off the Pacific Ocean. The sound of waves against rocks had become my morning meditation, replacing the traffic sounds of Oakland with something older, deeper, more peaceful. The cottage was small, just 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and a kitchen with windows overlooking the water. Robert had bought it 2 years before his death, recording the deed in the trust with a note. For Dot's new beginning, for when she's ready for ocean air and no schedule but her own. I'd found the deed 3 weeks after the confrontation with Brandon, tucked into a safe deposit box at Wells Fargo, along with one final letter. My darling Dot, if you're reading this, you've faced them down. You've stood up for yourself. You've discovered your own strength. This cottage is your reward, your sanctuary, the place where you can finally rest. I bought it after our anniversary trip, remember? When you stood on the beach at sunset and said, someday I want to wake up to this view every morning. Someday is now, baby. Live, love, be free, forever yours. Robert, I'd cried for an hour after reading it. Then I'd listed the Oakland house for sale. It sold in 3 days for $695,000. After paying off the home equity line and covering fees, I cleared $248,000. Combined with my other accounts and the steady income from Washington & Sons Restoration, Sam Tucker was running it brilliantly, sending me quarterly checks averaging $8,500. I was more financially secure than I'd ever been in my life. My phone rang. Thursday morning, 10 a.m., right on schedule. Hi, Sam. Morning, Mrs. Washington. Got the quarterly numbers for you. How are we doing? Better than projected. That Morrison building restoration came in under budget and ahead of schedule. Plus, we landed the new contract for the Fox Theater renovation, $890,000 over 18 months. We're going to have to hire 2 more people. That's wonderful, Sam. Hire who you need. You're the expert. Yes, ma'am. Oh, and Mrs. Washington? Brandon called yesterday, asked if there were any openings on the crew. My heart clenched. What did you tell him? Told him I'd need to check with the owner and get back to him. What do you want me to say? I thought about my son. We'd had exactly 4 conversations in the past 6 months. Brief, awkward, but he'd made every single payment on time. $1,200 on the first of each month, without fail, and he'd texted me last month. Started therapy. Vanessa and I are divorced. I'm working on being the son you deserved. I know it'll take time, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Tell him yes, I said, as he said. Starting wage, same as any new hire. He works under you, follows your rules, no special treatment. You sure about that? No, but Robert always said people deserve the chance to rebuild. Let's see if Brandon takes it seriously. After hanging up, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cool under my bare feet, the morning air crisp and clean. I joined a book club here, made friends, real friends, not people who wanted something from me. Started painting again, something I'd given up 40 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text, from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Washington, this is Linda Morrison, Gloria's daughter. Mom told me about your situation. I'm starting a support group for women who've dealt with financial manipulation by family members. Would you be willing to share your story? I looked out at the ocean, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the discovery, the confrontation, the freedom. Yes, I typed back. I'd be honored, because that was the thing I'd learned. My story wasn't just about money or houses or family drama. It was about something deeper. It was about the difference between being loved and being protected. Robert could have just left me money, could have written a simple will dividing everything equally, could have taken the easy path. Instead, he'd spent 4 years building me a fortress, teaching me, without my even knowing, how to stand up for myself, showing me through documents and trusts and careful planning that I was worth protecting, that I was worth more than being convenient, more than being compliant, more than being quiet and grateful for whatever scraps my family chose to give me. My phone rang again, this time Brandon's number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hi, Mom. His voice was tentative. Is this a good time? It's fine. What do you need? Nothing. I wanted to tell you something. I'm 3 months into therapy and I'm starting to understand what happened. How I lost myself. How I hurt you. That's good, Brandon. And I wanted to say thank you for giving me the job. Sam told me this morning. I know I don't deserve it. You're right. You don't. But Sam needs good workers, and you were trained by the best. Don't make me regret this. I won't, I promise. He paused. Mom, can I ask you something? What? Do you think Dad would be proud of me for trying to fix this? I thought about Robert, about his final words, about all the years he'd spent building protection for me while hoping his son would wake up. I think, I said carefully, that your father always believed in second chances, but he also believed that people had to earn them. So ask me that question again in a year, after you've shown up every day and done the work. That's fair. His voice was thick. I love you, Mom. I know I haven't said that in a long time, but I do. I love you too, Brandon, but love isn't enough anymore. I need respect. I need consistency. I need you to be the man your father tried to raise you to be. I'm working on it, I swear. After we hung up, I walked back to the cottage and made myself a cup of coffee. I carried it out to the deck and sat in the Adirondack chair Robert had left here, watching the seals play in the kelp beds offshore. I thought about writing, maybe a memoir, maybe just letters to other women who'd found themselves in similar situations. Women who'd been told they were too old, too naive, too dependent to manage on their own. Women who'd discovered, like I had, that age wasn't weakness, that quietness wasn't stupidity, that grieving didn't mean defenseless. I pulled out my journal and wrote, I'm Dorothy Washington. I'm 68 years old. I was married to a man who loved me enough to build me a fortress I never knew I needed. And when my own family tried to take advantage of my grief, I discovered something important. The greatest inheritance Robert left me wasn't money. It wasn't property. It wasn't even the business. It was the knowledge that I was worth protecting, that I was worth fighting for, that I was worth more than being convenient. And now, at 68 years old, I'm finally learning what freedom really means. It means waking up to ocean views and no one else's schedule. It means making my own choices without explaining them to anyone. It means knowing that every decision I make is mine alone. Robert spent 4 years building me a fortress, but in the end, I discovered I was the fortress all along. I just needed someone to show me the blueprints. The sun broke through the morning clouds, painting the water gold. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to my husband, wherever he was. "Thank you, baby," I whispered. "For everything, but especially for believing I could do this." A seal barked offshore and I laughed, a real laugh, full of joy and freedom and the knowledge that I'd survived the worst and come out stronger. At 68 years old, Dorothy Washington's life was just beginning. And nobody, not my son, not my former daughter-in-law, not anyone, was ever going to make me feel small again. I was done being underestimated. I was done being dismissed. I was done being anything other than exactly who I chose to be. And who I chose to be was free.